Hello again, 8th grade. It is a Friday. Will be the end of our week, and you'll enjoy your weekend come tomorrow. So it is April 24th, and we're going to be on section 22.3, Economic Struggle and International Strife. We'll be reading pages 363 to 366. But before we do that, I know you finished the quiz yesterday, but you have another quiz, quiz 40 today. So please pause the video and go ahead and do quiz 40. Alright, hopefully you've done quiz 40 and it shouldn't be too difficult for you. There will be no section review today at the end of the book. Since you just did a quiz, I'm not going to have you do both today. So we're going to begin. 22.3, Economic Struggles and International Strife. We're going to start with President Gerald Ford. Upon Nixon's resignation in August of 1974, Vice President Gerald Ford becomes president. Wanting to leave the Watergate affair behind him and to get on with the nation's business, President Ford pardoned Richard Nixon for any offenses he might have committed. President Ford wanted to cut back on government spending and social welfare, but Congress refused to cooperate and the economy suffered as a result. Franchises and chain stores. The face of American towns and cities gradually changed as franchise businesses and chain stores multiplied across the country. A franchise or chain store is a store that has multiple locations. Examples of these include things that you may be familiar with, such as McDonald's, Dollar General, Family Dollar, Dollar Tree, Walmart, Target, Taco Bell. Pretty much anything that you call a fast food chain originated as a chain store or chain business. A franchise is a permit to market a product or provide a service in a given area as a local business. However, a chain store is a national company, Walmart is an example, marketing a product or providing a service in a certain area. Chain stores become popular and replaced small town shops throughout the nation. Sam Walton was one who prospered from the chain store. Starting with one small store in Arkansas, he prospered and eventually opened other stores until Walton became one of the wealthiest men in the world. The 1976 Bicentennial. The highlight of the 1970s was the Bicentennial or 200-year celebration in 1976. Cities and towns across the nation observed our country's 200th birthday with patriotic celebrations, reviving a spirit of patriotism in America. Some hoped that our nation would regain her earlier strength. Now we're going to learn about President Carter. The best intentions. By 1977, Americans were ready for a change and elected James Carter, a farmer and former governor of Georgia, who had no ties to Washington politics. In fact, Jimmy Carter was pretty much just a peanut farmer. Jimmy Carter was the first man from the Deep South to win the presidency since Zachary Taylor all the way in 1848. Carter's active involvement in his church as a Sunday school teacher showed that he was a man of good intentions, but he often lacked discernment of character and failed to recognize the sinful nature of man. Jimmy Carter saw all people as good and had a hard time recognizing evil. This weakness quickly became evident in his foreign policy and his confidence in the United Nations, giving up the Panama Canal. In 1977, President Carter followed the desire of the United Nations and negotiated the surrender of the Panama Canal Zone to the military dictator of Panama. This gave communists around the world the idea that the United States had given up on its policy to protect Central America from communism, which led to increased terrorism in El Salvador and Nicaragua. Energy and economic woes. By 1977, many Americans wanted to end the nation's dependence on imported oil. President Carter encouraged the development of solar energy, energy from the power of the sun. Atomic power plants offered a solution to the energy problems, but many environmental groups opposed nuclear development. In 1979, an accident at the nuclear power plant at 3 Mile Island near Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, gave the environmentalists the support they were looking for. Although no one was injured in the accident, part of the plant was contaminated with radioactive material, and the entire facility closed down. Careful safety precautions and advanced technology made it impossible for a reactor to explode or contaminate a wide area, but environmentalists insisted that nuclear plants were dangerous. With new environmental regulations, the atomic energy program was cut back and private industry stopped building nuclear plants. Under President Carter, the government continued to print more money to pay for social welfare programs. As the government spent more than it took in, it created what is known as a serious budget deficit and encouraged inflation. The rising price of oil also encouraged inflation. From 1977 to 1981, OPEC increased the price of oil by 250%. In addition to gas for cars and trucks, Americans bought many plastic and chemical products also made from petroleum oil. As prices for oil rose, the price of consumer goods also increased. Labor unions demanded more pay to offset the rising cost of living, but labor productivity fell as union workers received more pay for less work. All of these factors contributed to a high rate of inflation, which hurt the economy. The inflation rate had reached record levels by 1980. America was in serious financial trouble. And while this is going on, there's also troubles in Nicaragua, one of our South American cousins. In 1979, a group known as the Sandinistas overthrew the dictatorship of Anastasio Somoza in Nicaragua. The Somoza family had ruled Nicaragua for many years, and their corrupt policies had hurt the Nicaraguan people. The Sandinista movement originally included many sincere people who at first wanted to end dishonesty in the government. But radicals within the movement organized a communist guerrilla army, armed with weapons from the Soviet Union and Cuba, and staged an uprising, forcing Somoza to flee the country. Once the Sandinistas were in power, the United States urged them to allow free elections and set up a democratic government. But the communists seized control and eliminated the conservative Sandinistas. Some were killed, while others fled the country, living in fear under the communists, or joined a resistance movement of freedom fighters known as the Contras. In 1979, President Carter announced the signing of the SALT II agreement, an attempt to reestablish equality in missile systems between the United States and the Soviet Union. Remember, the first SALT agreement, we were supposed to kind of regulate weapons between us and the Soviet Union. We followed it, but the Soviets did not. So SALT II was kind of a way to try to do this again. While the treaty waited for Senate approval, trouble erupted in the Middle East and Asia. Many nations had begun to regard the United States now as a weak nation. In 1979, a revolution deposed the anti-communist Shah of Iran. Iranian rebels under the Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, a Muslim religious leader, captured the American embassy in Tehran, the Iranian capital, and took American diplomatic personnel hostage. President Carter and Congress failed to help the Shah restore his government and secured the release of the American hostages. By 1980, the United States had reached a historic low in its ability to defend its freedom and itself, encouraging the Soviet Union to invade the nation of Afghanistan. The Senate rejected the SALT II agreement, and President Carter learned that communists cannot be trusted. At the Camp David peace accords, President Carter persuaded the leader of Egypt, Anwar Sadat, and Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin to agree to a peace treaty. For the first time in over 2,000 years, Jews and Arabs sat down together to discuss peace. So not all of Jimmy Carter's reign as presidency was bad, and he was a good man at heart, a very friendly person. He had a hard time, though, telling good from evil, as many good people do. From the 50s to the 70s, throughout the 1940s and 1950s, the moral restraints of biblical values had provided a system of law and order that Americans honored because righteousness exalteth the nation, according to Proverbs 14, verses 34. America enjoyed great progress and prosperity during this time. In the 1960s and the 1970s, however, the nation began to decline both spiritually and economically. As the philosophy of secular humanism spread, a spirit of rebellion swept across America, encouraging alcohol and drug abuse and immorality among the nation's youth. Declining moral standards led to a breakdown of families and a decrease in patriotism. Economic troubles accompanied America's moral failure, for a vast welfare system had developed, making many people dependent on the government and burdening hard-working Americans with excessive taxes. Taxes and government regulations on business further hindered economic growth, while inflation continued to rise. By 1980, America was in desperate need of new leadership. Without a return to traditional values, biblical morality, and responsible government, the nation would continue to decline. Thus, as the presidential election of 1980 approached, many conservatives and Christians began to take political action. And in the upcoming chapters, we'll see a return in strength to the nation once a man by the name of Ronald Reagan comes into power. And you'll see that America returns to being a patriotic and powerful country. But through the 60s and 70s, because of this moral decline, our country really does hit some lows. But that concludes section 22.3. Make sure you remember, no section review today because you had that quiz. Guys, I hope you have a great weekend. I'll see you Monday.